Hi all, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be about our Bearmach fridge that we purchased about 4 or 5 months ago now. We've used it on a couple of long weekend trips. It's given us an idea of what it's like, and obviously from getting other opinions from people that already own the fridge, it's sort of reinforced us to get one. You get quite a lot for your money. I'll just start off by saying it's a 42 litre Bearmach fridge. I'll cut in footage here and there and you'll see me opening it up and showing where I've mounted the fridge in the Land Rover, and you'll see what sort of setup I've got for the fridge, and you know, all the functions and the dials and the buttons on it and compartments inside. And I was debating on actually using it as a second freezer at home when we've got the other freezer full up. So you can use it as a freezer or a fridge, not both unfortunately. I know that dearer higher end fridges have that option, but it's only got one compartment door. It only has the option to have it as a fridge or a freezer at any one time, but it will change temperature quite quickly. So just for an example, if your ambient temperature is around 15 degrees and you want it set to 2 degrees, which is the recommended temperature for a fridge, generally, compressor fridge, it will get down to 2 degrees in between 5 and 10 minutes once the compressor kicks in. So when you first turn it on, it will be a couple of minutes until the compressor kicks in and it recognises the temperature. Yeah, I was well impressed with how quickly it gets down to that. The initial kick will probably draw around up to 10 to 15 amps. So the fuse that comes with the fridge is a 15 amp fuse. So it just goes to show it can kick up to that in an initial draw. But once it's sort of got down to temperature, it won't draw any power when it's just sort of sitting at that temperature. And then it will recognise it goes up 1 or 2 degrees. The thermostat will recognise that and kick in again. So after the initial kick of the compressor, it will sort of hover around 3 amps, according to the spec anyway. So it was, you know, draw, if it was to run constantly, if the compressor was running constantly, so say if you had the lid open and the fridge had to compensate for that, it would draw 3 to 4 amps per hour, which, to be honest, that's not a lot at all, is it really? So with the setup that I've got at the moment, it's I've got the second battery hooked up to a 150 watt solar panel that's mounted on top of the tent box rooftop tent, and that will then go into the C-Tech DC to DC charger. It's got a built-in MPPT solar controller, and that will take the 6 to 8 amps maximum from the solar panel and convert that into usable voltage, so it'd be around 14 volts, hover around that, and then that will trickle charge the leisure battery. And once the leisure battery is full up, it will then backflow that to the starter battery, which is an awesome function. So if you've got the vehicle sat for weeks and weeks, like this current climate we're in at the moment with this isolation that we're in, with the vehicle sat on the drive, the C-Tech and the solar panel just keeping everything topped up, the leisure battery and the starter battery, which is quite handy to have. The way I've got it set up at the moment, if you were to run the fridge 24/7, just leave it on and it would hover around 2 degrees, whether the ambient temperature is 20 degrees or 2 degrees, it will stay at 2 degrees. And with the solar panel on a half decent, you know, sunny day, it would run the fridge, you could run the fridge 24/7 without stopping it. So that's a nice feature. I don't tend to run it all the time, I tend to only use it when we're going on a trip. I'll leave it off apart from that, but at least the C-Tech's still keeping the batteries charged up, and if you did need to run the fridge 24/7, i.e. keeping some extra overflow items from your home fridge or freezer, it's great for that as well. So it's multifunctional in that sense. I'll talk a little bit about the sections inside the fridge. So you've got the sort of the deep area where you'd put all your meats and the bits you want to keep cold, your drinks and what have you. And you've got an overflow section that's about half as deep, maybe not even quite as deep as that, for your fruit and your veg, and that's not getting the direct cooling effect like the aluminium sided area, the deeper compartment. So your fruit and veg won't be so affected, and they'll just stay fresh. They're not going to get frozen, because if you do leave some bits in the bottom, you will start to get a little bit of icy build up. if you've got it sitting around freezing to 2 degrees eventually if you left that running all the time. you'd start to get a bit of freezing on the bottom. So it's nice to know that if you wanted to keep your fruit and veg fresh for as long as possible, you've got that overflow area. That's good to have on a week-long trip or longer than that. So if you were stocking up for a week, you've got plenty of, areas to store your different types of food. So in the compartment where you'd normally store your fruit and your veg, that shallower compartment, you've got a sort of a 4-bulb LED area. So a square LED light that lights the whole fridge up, which is very handy. So if you lift the fridge more than 2 inches, I think it will recognise that, and then the LED will come on. So that's very handy indeed, especially when it's pitch black out. So that's a nice little function. Just reading my notes here. I've got it strapped down in the vehicle with 2 ratchet straps, inch wide, nothing too major, but it's nice to know these handles, I believe they're steel in the plastic sort of mounts that they're in. You can put a fair old bit of strapping force down on those handles to mount it in the vehicle, so it's nice to know that your fridge isn't going to go anywhere if you strap it down with inch wide ratchet straps. So that's not a problem there at all. The build quality is plenty good enough in that sense. And the rest of the case is all plastic on the outside, which is quite durable. There's no steel or aluminium on the outside, but you can see that the plastic is good quality. And being that it's holding those 2 steel handles, it's not taking any sort of punishment there. So as I mentioned earlier, you can use the fridge as a freezer, and it will go all the way down to -20 degrees C. So if you did want to use it as just purely as a freezer in the vehicle, the recommended temperature is -18 degrees for your home deep freeze. So if you put it down to -18, you'd be down to that temperature within 15 minutes from ambient, which is very nice. That's a nice function. So I don't tend to use it as a freezer. I just keep it as a fridge, because once you have it as a freezer, you've then not got a fridge area. So it's a compromise there. But if you did have a second fridge that you just used purely as a fridge, and then that one as a freezer, it's nice to know that you've got that sort of reliability there to get it down to temperature, and it will keep it there and won't draw any more than if it was a fridge. It would kick in a bit more often, hence drawing a little bit more in that sense, but only when it's kicking in. So when it's just sitting at that temperature and insulating that temperature. As I said earlier, recommended temperature for a fridge 2 degrees, and it will stay at that all day long. Can run it 24/7, especially if you've got solar input or you're hooked up to the mains. So we've used the fridge on a couple of weekend trips, nothing major. Obviously before this whole isolation thing, we used it for a trip in the Lake District for a long weekend, and we only kept it kept it half full, nothing too much, just some meats and some drinks, and that sort of thing, and it kept it ice cold, no problem at all. So if we're sleeping in the vehicle, the fridge will kick in and out and you'll barely even notice it. It's that quiet. It's nice to know that it's not unbearably loud when the compressor kicks in and out. That's a nice feature. So all in all, I can't fault it. I can't fault the fridge at all. I mean, we've not owned it for past the year yet, but we've owned it long enough to know that it's good for what we need. And the price bracket that I bought it for, I only paid £230 for it at the time. That was a fair discount on. But they're always out of stock, so they're very popular. But I just thought I'd put my opinion out there on the fridge. I can't fault it. So it's been good to us so far, so I'll just keep running that, and I don't feel the need to buy a £600 fridge, or up to £1,000 for some of them. But it's nice to know that you can get a more budget-friendly option for around the £300 mark. So I paid £230 for it with a massive discount that was on at the time. I think they were trying to clear some stock and people weren't buying them at that moment. But it sort of fluctuates, so people will go and buy all their stock and then they'll get them back in stock and then they won't sell them and then all of a sudden they'll be gone again. So it fluctuates like that. So I'd keep an eye out, because I know they're selling on eBay and bits like that for a slightly higher price due to keep losing the stock. So yeah, I'd highly recommend the 42 litre. If you've got a bigger family and you need the 52 litre option, that'd be more than enough room. I've found that 42 litre is more than enough room for us, being that there's only 2 of us in the vehicle. I reckon that would do us at least a week. I hope this review was of some use to you. And that's how we feel about the Bearmach fridge. I'd highly recommend it to anyone who was on a bit of a budget and didn't want to spend £1,000, £600 if you're lucky, on a expensive, higher brand fridge. So I'd highly recommend the 42 litre Bearmach fridge. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the review. and keep an eye on the channel for the next one. If you haven't already subscribed, if you think about hitting that red button below, we'd really appreciate it. It will help us out. And if you want to leave us a comment below on what you think about the fridge and whether you would consider buying one, if you've got any other sort of options that you've looked at but on a budget, then leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.